If we fast forward 5 years, what does the world look like in terms of how our lives change with AI?
Copilots will become a skill at least as important as working with people, as collaboration with people. And those copilots will perform various functions. They will often be very autonomous. Some of them will operate in near real time. I ask a question, you help me to get to the answer and solution. Others will be, as you indicated, much more autonomous in going off to do the work and come back when they need help. So I think for existing organizations, there will be a great rewiring. It will really be an AI-driven kind of business process re-engineering wave about, this is how finance was done in the olden days. How do we do finance today? And it lowers the barriers to entry for very innovative, inventive-driven people, I think, to go change the world.
These three things are interesting, which is reasoning, planning, and memory. And how far away do you think we are, or are we there already, in terms of autonomous agents that really work at an...
I don't think we're quite there yet, but we are seeing glimmers across the industry, certainly not just with Microsoft, of people being able to do this in well-scoped domains. In particular with coding, we've seen some of it out there, and I think our listeners will know some of those that have been cited. And so I would say that my guess would be by the end of this calendar year, so a couple months from now, we're going to see some that are truly amazing, where we're going to feel like, wow, that rivals a human's ability in this domain, supply chain, coding, things like that, to take a problem, break it down into tasks, execute on those things, come up for air when it needs direction or feels like it doesn't know what to do next, and then go completely.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
The first time I used one of these agents that you're referring to, like Cognition, I guess I can say it more freely as one of the leading kind of agents in the software development space. It's just crazy, right? Where just even the interaction model of giving an AI a task and then going for coffee and coming back 45 minutes later, and they've made progress and they're asking you questions. It's really fascinating.
That you're right. There's innovation to be done on the interaction model itself. So I think that we're going to see that at some scale, not scale where like everybody's using them, but at some scale beyond just the earliest adopters this calendar year. And then if I go to like, what are the technical hurdles? Well, there just hasn't been, an industry adopted, recognized standard for things like how do you store what we would call a plan? How do you take that idea of reason to come up with a plan, then do plan and execution, keep that plan and learn on that plan, and essentially kind of use memory to both execute and get smarter over time. All those things, I think right now are subject to innovation. I think we'll see spikes of innovation, and then as we often do in this industry, we see kind of things settle into dominant design. And I bet you we'll see dominant design on that towards the end of this calendar year in a bunch of those places.
And do you think that planning engine will be built by the large models, or do you think that's a distinct capability? I'll give you my personal opinion right at the moment. What I have seen is that we all kind of feel like the models do a fine job. I have the most experience with GPT-4, obviously, but that we sure wish they were more powerful. So I think there's a little bit of a race between what you might think of as like specialized systems and services that would do that versus the continued drops of those LLMs, like the models getting progressively stronger. And I think if we had everybody in the industry who was like state of the art at this moment, I bet you there would be disagreement of some people saying, hey, give it time. The models themselves, in a couple months are going to start to get so good that you won't need a specialized service. And some people would say, hey, just like the brain has an executive function up front, on the prefrontal cortex that does this type of work, you should have that in your system too. So I don't know. I don't feel like I've seen enough evidence one way or the other. This has been a fascinating discussion. Maybe to close it off, I'm curious, if we fast forward 5 years, what does the world look like? What's the most optimistic take in terms of how our lives change with AI?
Well, I'm really focused, Seth, on AI at work. The way I see it is building, working with, optimizing, overseeing agents. If we use the industry term, we would call them copilots. Will become a skill at least as important as working with people, as collaboration with people. I anticipate that you will see departments, teams, groups that are very naturally composed of some people and lots of copilots, is the way that Microsoft would say it. And those copilots will perform various functions. They will often be very autonomous. Some of them will operate in near real time. I ask a question, you help me to get to the answer and a solution. Others will be, as you indicated, much more autonomous and going off to do the work and come back when they need help. But the interesting thing for me is I think that presents us, if I get very practical for a moment, with two things to think about. Number one, we have existing organizations today, firms today, that are built on what I would call kind of an organizational paradigm that comes out of the 1940s and 50s. It was built all around people. We've introduced information systems, but those have been largely to augment people. People pull on those information systems. So I think for existing organizations, there will be a fundamental, a great rewiring is what I might call it. It will really be an AI-driven kind of business process re-engineering wave about, gosh, this is how finance was done in the olden days. How do we do finance today? And you can take every function. But that begs another question that to me might even be even more interesting, certainly for this audience, which is, well, wait a second, what about AI native firms? Does this mean that they can be built from the ground up, just like cloud native firms were back in the day, starting with the new premise? Do you really need a full HR department? Do you really need a full finance team? Do you really need, a full sales team the way we used to think about it? And undoubtedly, there will be lots of room for people. So I don't think 5 years out we don't need people, but I think that the structure of the firm, even certainly the workflows of the firm, even the culture of a firm, will be very different, and it gives an opportunity. It lowers the barriers to entry for very innovative, inventive-driven people, I think, to go change the world. So I'm very excited about that, because if we can unleash people today, there's a huge barrier to entry to get to scale, and we call it, the organization of the firm. If we can unleash that faster and at a lower threshold, I think we will have done something really great for the world.